foretell the coming of this Messiah. And we'll look more at that, but this self-revelation of God in a form we could understand. And he foretold that as well, as we'll see. God foretells a time when the Messiah comes, and then the Jewish people would be scattered to all the nations, but then he would bring them back to Jerusalem, and he says, as a sign to all the nations that he is real. Okay, so here he's saying, I'm going to give you a sign. So let's look at it. In Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10 through 12, remember this is written in 680 BC. In that day, the root of Jesse, okay, the root of Jesse stands for Messiah, because they knew the Messiah was going to come through the line of King David, and Jesse was David's father. So in that day, the Messiah, the root of Jesse, will stand as a banner or a sign for the peoples. The nations will rally to him. Again, he's speaking to the nations, and his resting place will be glorious. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people, of Israel. He will raise a banner, a sign, for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah, the Jewish people, from the four quarters of the earth. Okay, now, this prophecy of Isaiah, remember, God already said, here's how you'll know it's me. I alone can foretell what the future is going to be. God will give a sign, he says, to all the nations, that after the Messiah comes, so in that day, the nations will have rallied to him. The Jewish people will have been scattered, he said, to the north, south, east, and west, to the four quarters of the earth. Now, he said a second time. Interestingly, the first time was when the Jewish people were scattered to Babylon during the exile. That happened, and they were brought back to Jerusalem and rebuilt it in 444 around BC. Okay, so that real history actually happened. The second time they would be scattered to the nations turned out to be 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus. So Jesus is crucified, claims to be the Messiah, is crucified in about 30 AD, 40 years later, in 70 AD. And this is actual historical records. You can go look it up. The Roman general Titus comes in and destroys Jerusalem, wipes it out, and the people are scattered to the nations. The second time, they're scattered to the nations, and for 1900 years. Okay, so think about that. And notice, this is real, verifiable history, all right, that you can't go make up. God told Isaiah in 680 BC that he would regather the Jewish people, again, as a sign to all people, all right? And Isaiah, the prophet Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Jesus, they all foretell this event that happened in our day, in 1948, the regathering and the birth of a nation in one day. Okay, so again, in Isaiah, in 680 BC, this is Isaiah chapter 66, God says this to Isaiah, who writes it down. Who ever heard of such a thing? Has a nation ever been born in a single day? No, it's never happened in history. Has a country ever come forth in a mere moment? No, that'd be miraculous, right? But by the time Jerusalem's birth pains begin, her children will be born. Would I ever bring this nation to the point of birth and then not deliver it? Asked the Lord, asked Yahweh. I will gather all nations and peoples together. Again, this is all nations he's speaking to. And they will see my glory. I will perform a sign among them. They will bring the remnant of your people, the Jewish people, back from every nation. They will bring them to my holy mountain in Jerusalem. Now, if this doesn't blow your mind, you're not understanding. Go back and listen again. I wrote it down in Imagine the God of Heaven so you could read it carefully. Because this is the sign everybody wants. I don't see how you can explain it any other way. God says, I'm going to tell you how you'll know I'm real. I will tell you the future before it happens. He says, I'm going to give a sign to all the nations. The scattered Jewish people are going to be regathered a second time, and a nation's going to be born overnight. And so how do you explain this? That the Jewish people were not a people for 1900 years. They were scattered across the globe. They had no king, no president, no government, no common language. The Hebrew language had been lost. It was just reborn just a couple hundred years ago. And they had no land for 1900 years, from 70 AD to 1948. And then suddenly Russian Jews, Ethiopian Jews, American Jews, European Jews, Australian Jews, African Jews come back and resettle the land from all over the world, all speaking different languages. And they came back as one, quote, chosen people to form a new nation born overnight. Now, this is a sign, God said, to all the nations. So I know this is very timely. It's very timely because of what's happening right now in Israel and Palestine. And I need to say something that's a little bit of a caveat, because some people will ask questions like, well, why did God choose the Jewish people? Why does he favor them? And you need to understand, chosen does not mean favored. God loves all people equally. God loves the Palestinians. God loves Hamas and Hezbollah as much as he does the Israelites. Okay? Doesn't mean he loves what they're doing. And Israel, though he loves them and has chosen them, can also do things that God does not want and is not his will. And yet, God can still use all these things to show that he is God and he is sovereign over all nations. And that is exactly what he's doing. So, chosen doesn't mean chosen as better than or favored. Chosen means chosen for a responsibility. And the responsibility the Jewish people had was to preserve the scriptures and foretell of the Messiah, who would come for the sake of all people, of all nations. You know, it's fascinating because God said to the prophet Jeremiah, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And that's exactly what's happening with near-death experiencers today. They are discovering this same God in their near-death experience, but they don't always know who he is until they come back and they seek, and when they seek, they find.